I wish I had a producer to blame that on. Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. A couple of college football super fans coming to talk some college football with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got our Week 11 big game breakdowns that we're about to get into. We've got Alabama, LSU, UGA, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Vandy, and we've got a holy war way out west that we're going to talk about as well. Mason, how you doing? Welcome back. We're a day late. I'm $1 short like usual, but you know what? That's all right. We get it in when we can get it in. All right. So we're here on Wednesday. We try to come in on Tuesday typically, guys, and um, you know, I had stuff going on yesterday, so here we are. How you doing, man?
Yeah, well, I can't fault you, Mark. It was one of the biggest days of the year. And, I was really excited with the results. I think the college football playoff really just knocked it out of the park. It was it was very fun to watch. But not, a little bit weird Georgia being ranked below Ohio State, but we'll get into all that. Not too much to pick at about yesterday.
I saw the college football playoff rankings. I said, wow, that's a bad ranking. I've never seen such a bad ranking. No, it was fine. Yeah, it was a big day for a lot of reasons, I guess you could say. Big Daddy, our Big Daddy president is back, and so that kind of caught everybody's attention, I think, yesterday as well. So whether you're upset about that, whether you're happy about that, I don't really give a shit. We're here to talk college football. And we're going to enjoy doing that for an hour and a half here, and I hope that you will enjoy doing that with us as well. Yeah, the college football playoff bracket. Look, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I haven't even looked through the whole thing yet. It's been a really busy couple of days for me, and then what spare time I did have, I was trying to get ready for these big matchups that we're about to talk about. But one thing that kind of caught my eye, I did see something while I was watching another show last night. Was the fact that Ohio State was ranked there ahead of Georgia. And, if you want to argue that Ohio State is a better team than Georgia, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. I mean, I don't really have anything to sit here and say this team's better than this team. I mean, they don't have any common opponents or anything. I mean, there's really, and the transitive property doesn't necessarily apply full sail in college football anyway. But we kind of talked about it before we started the show today because I'm trying to figure out what I'm missing here. But one team's got a loss to Oregon at Oregon. One team's got a loss to Alabama at Alabama. Now, I think everybody would agree that this year, at least so far, we haven't seen the two teams play. But eye test would tell you that Oregon is better than Alabama. Okay, and I don't think that's a far stretch, but Alabama's ranked in everybody's top 25 at this point. So Georgia going on the road and losing to a top 25 team in the last couple of minutes of the game, mind you. Georgia had that game won. I mean, let's be real, with a minute and 50 left, and ended up losing the dang thing. So wah, cry, cry. It is what it is. Georgia loses, and I predicted Georgia to lose that game, by the way. So it is what it is. I kind of expected it. But with all that being said, Georgia goes on the road and beats Texas, who's the number one team at the time. And I know we're not going to take a ranking from, when you beat a team. It's their ranking, at the end of the season. But Texas is still in everybody's top 10, Mason. So Georgia going on the road and beating a top 10 team. What win does Ohio State have that's anywhere close to that at this point? And beyond that, I know we've seen Georgia struggle a couple of times this season, and I don't. We haven't. There's not one team that I can think of other than Indiana that hasn't struggled this season at some point, right? But Georgia didn't lose those games. You know what I'm saying? Ohio State struggled in some of their games. What about with Nebraska? What are your thoughts on the college football playoff ranking? I just that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And this is all going to work itself out. And there it is on your screen. You guys can take a look. I mean, like I said, all this is going to work itself out. And Georgia may take a second loss this week. I don't know. They're going on the road to Ole Miss. Ole Miss looks like a pretty good team. We're going to talk about that game in a minute. But your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this isn't. I feel like the bracket isn't much different than what we've been predicting. Now, what's different about this bracket versus our predictions is that our predictions are predictions. They're actually projections based on the upcoming schedule, the remaining schedule, who we think is going to win the conference championships and things like that. So this isn't the college football playoff committee does not project, but they also don't look at like what the potential of these teams are. They're not projecting in the slightest. So they're not looking at Ohio State and saying we think Ohio State is a better team from a power rating perspective. That's not really, that hasn't been much of the reasoning behind these selections. It's usually based off a resume. And I think to your point, Ohio State's best win was last week against Penn State, a game that they could have very well lost. Well, Penn State struggled with USC, and USC's hot garbage. So should Penn State really be ranked sixth based off of their resume? It's tough to say because they haven't played anybody, and that's been the big issue with the Big Ten is that they don't play anyone. Yeah. And it feels like there's been sort of this shift of the guard from SEC to the Big Ten being considered, the better conference. And I just don't know where that's coming from. The SEC teams are losing to other SEC teams, which tells you that it's actually a strong conference in a lot of ways. You look at the Big Ten and it's just very top heavy. And I don't feel like if you were to put Penn State in the SEC, I mean, I think that they're losing to Georgia. I think they're losing to Alabama. I think they're losing to Texas, Tennessee, Texas A&M. There's a host of teams in the SEC that would whoop up on Penn State if they got an opportunity to play one another. And we might see that in the college football playoff. I certainly hope we do. But this idea that the SEC is down is, I think it's the opposite. I think that there's more parity. I think that the teams at the top aren't as deep as they used to be, and that's creating more parity. That coupled with the fact that these games are shorter, so the depth doesn't matter as much as it used to. But ultimately, I feel like conference to conference, the SEC is still a much stronger conference at this point than the Big Ten or any other conference. So not really sure where this changing of the guard is coming from. But ultimately, look, this was the first one. We've seen how much of a difference these college football playoff selection committees can change from the first one to the last one. If you recall, the first college football playoff selection, in that selection, they had Mississippi State and Ole Miss and Auburn in their top four, right? What happened to Ole Miss and Mississippi State? Like they were gone. So these things can change. They can be very fluid. I think one thing's for certain: Oregon is in for sure. There's just no way that they're not in the playoffs in some capacity. Outside of that, I think that there's still a lot of ball to be played, and all of these teams are subject to being left out at some point. All it takes is one bad loss. Notre Dame can't afford to lose. Penn State at this point can't afford to lose. Especially if they're not going to play in a Big Ten championship game. Boise State absolutely cannot afford to lose. You've got an Army team that's still undefeated, and they might have to play Notre Dame, who might end up being a top 5 team when it's all said and done if they lose to them, but win their conference. And Boise State loses to somebody else on their schedule that's not a top 10 team. Army's going to get in, right? Nobody on this. Other than Oregon, I don't think that anyone on this in this top 12 is safe at this point. And you can point to some of the projections or the ESPN playoff predictor or whatever, and see that some of these teams are having or that they have greater than 75% chance or whatever. But at the end of the day, a lot of these teams still have some pretty tough football games ahead of them, and a lot of it will work itself out. But I'm not really too upset. We're nitpicking talking about Georgia or Ohio State at this point, but this does give us a glimpse at what this playoff committee is going to judge these teams based off of. And I think that was the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think it's some interesting points that you kind of brush upon there. I mean, look at the Big Ten right here on your screen, and you've got two teams that are undefeated, obviously, in Indiana and Oregon there, and then you've got Ohio State, Penn State. If Indiana beats Ohio State, Mason, and first of all, how do you handle the Ohio State Penn State thing? You've got Ohio State with a head-to-head win over Penn State, and then if you got Ohio State with two losses, how do you handle the playoffs from there? But to sit there and think that you know, say all four of these teams got in, right? Say Ohio State gives Indiana a loss, Indiana beats Oregon in the Big Ten championship, and then you've got four teams at the end of the season with one loss here. Are all four of those teams getting in? And furthermore, what is Penn State's win to hang their hat on at that point?
Mhm.
Because they will not have played in that Big Ten championship, as you discussed. So you don't really have a game there to hang your hat on. And I don't know, man. Obviously, you said it. Oregon's in. I mean, it's just it is what it is. Unless Oregon trips up twice somehow, between now and the end of the season, and that's just not going to happen. Let's just put that on ice. Oregon is getting ready for the playoffs. They're the first team to clinch in my eyes. Um, and then Indiana. I mean, it's all going to come down to that Ohio State game, right? And right now, I give Indiana the head to head in that situation. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. Ohio State's offense has not looked good. Penn State did not muster one offensive touchdown against Ohio State, man. And because it's the offense that we knew that it was. Penn State has struggled with USC this year. They struggled with Bowling Green this season. So it's not a situation that we're just now figuring out for Penn State, or it's one injury that's caused this, or no. This offense continues to be what it's been, and they've got a new offensive coordinator, and at certain times it's looked better, but it's against the opponents that you know Penn State was already beating anyway. So yeah, the Big Ten is a point of contention in this college football playoff, man. And really, to be honest with you, a lot of the root of the issue comes from the fact that Michigan has just been so bad this season, right? Michigan being as bad as what they've been, they were kind of, I felt like the nucleus of a lot of these new schedules. And with them sucking this year, it's just really kind of thrown things off. And it happens, it does. It's cyclical, but typically a team doesn't go from winning a national championship to falling flat on their face, like Michigan has, and it's really kind of upset the apple cart as far as the Big Ten goes, um, and that. So we'll keep this chart up here. I've got all the conference the conference standings as they are now. We'll kind of keep that up and be able to reference it as we go through the show today. Hey, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thanks for watching the First and Long College Football Show. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider hitting the subscribe button. We're about to jump into our big game breakdowns, and we've got a couple of real big ones here that we're excited to break down with you guys. If you would, real quick, hit that like button for us. It is 100% free, costs you nothing, and it helps tremendously. And so we would certainly appreciate it. Really helps get the word out. You guys did like a unbelievably fantastic job with that on the last live video. Therefore, it did really well, and uh, 1,000 people or thousands of people watched it. I don't know. I didn't go back and look, but I know it was doing pretty well because I was responding to comments and stuff. So thank you all so much for that, and I certainly do appreciate it. You guys keep me entertained all week with this stuff, um, and it's great to have people to talk college football with all week. So that's what we're building here at First and Long College Football Show, and we hope you'll come be part of that. All right, let's do the best for first here. We're not saving best for last. It's best for first, and it's the best because it's our Georgia Bulldogs, man. So let's jump into it. The Georgia Bulldogs are going to be going on the road to visit the Ole Miss Rebels in an SEC showdown. Ole Miss is a 2.5-point dog at home. The over/under is set at 54.5 in this one, Mason. This game last year was not particularly close, let's just say. And UGA did kind of run away with things in the fourth quarter and make it look even worse than really what it was in that game. But UGA wins it last year 52-17. And now we flip flop locations, right? And Georgia's going to have to go on the road with this one. And this is a huge matchup. I mean, there's really just no other way around it. Georgia's already got one loss. And with the way the SEC is shaping up this season, we'll kind of reference the SEC conference standings after we kind of go through the breakdowns of each of these teams here and kind of talk more about the SEC championship race. But Georgia is in it at this point with one loss, obviously, at Alabama. And there's no margin for error as far as that goes. And this is an opportunity for Georgia, one of two opportunities left on their schedule to get a big win here. Georgia's got one big win at Texas, and they're looking for another big one here as Ole Miss has had a really nice season this year. Um, a big part of this game, Mason, in my opinion, is going to boil down to can the Ole Miss defense take advantage of what has been a troubled offense for UGA? Not really just over the last few weeks, but especially over the last few weeks, but really throughout the season. There's been a lot of hiccups in the road, lots of speed bumps in the road, and particularly Carson Beck has been having some issues out there on the football field, and it's been very apparent. 11 interceptions over the last 5 games. It's a point of contention right now amongst Georgia fans, and not really contention. That may be the wrong word, but it's a point of concern, certainly. And this is a big, big matchup, as we said. So let's jump into this thing. We talked about that Georgia offense, and you know, through all the trials and tribulations Georgia has went through this season, there's light to gleam from the offense. So I don't want to sound too doom and gloom here. I mean, 33.1 points per game is okay, and Georgia's actually been able to figure out a way to run the ball. I feel like a little bit better over the last, I'd say three games. Georgia has been able to figure out how to run the ball a little bit better. ETN obviously went out in the Florida game hurt, so his status, I guess, is somewhat up in the air as far as this one goes. I'm assuming he plays, but maybe more on that. But Nate Frazier has been the guy that's kind of stepped up and had 80-something rushing yards in the Florida game last week and looked pretty good, looked pretty explosive, in my opinion. This Georgia offensive line, I feel like, has gotten a little bit better over the last few weeks. I would say a little bit to do with that has been getting some guys back healthy at center and things like that. I think you're still kind of waiting on Tate Ratledge's, reemergence. A lot of people had him considered to be the best offensive guard in the country this season going into the 2024 season. And if you don't know, he had gotten injured earlier this season and has not been back for several weeks now. So Georgia is kind of waiting on him to make his way back. And I think that'll help even more in the run game. And because it was a really slow start to start the season running the football. And there's been tons of injuries in that running back room. Georgia's really only got a couple of big backs. You got Cash Jones as well that I feel like probably needs to get a little more playing time, especially if ETN is going to be banged up. Expect to see number 32, Cash Jones. But look at the numbers for this offense, man. It's been a pass-first offense, right? And, Georgia has thrown the ball about 60% of the time this year. And that's just kind of the personnel I feel like that Georgia's got at this point, Mason. This isn't a road grading offensive line or anything like that, but they've done a good job protecting Carson Beck for the most part. 10 sacks allowed this year. That's 21st in the country. So for the most part, been able to form him a pocket and let him work. Now, look, let's be real. We talked about Carson Beck's woes. I've said some good things about this offense. So let's get into the bad stuff. There was pockets that Carson Beck had last week that he was getting happy feet and moving around. And 2 of his 3 interceptions last week, his feet were moving when he threw the football. Right. So, Carson, this game has got a lot to do with Carson going out there and being able to protect the football. When he does protect the football, when it's not a play that he's throwing to the other team, this guy looks great, Mason. I mean, he does. He's got the arm. He's got, he gets up and down the field. I mean, look at the pass yards per game, 299 per game. That's 12th in the country. Since when do you know Georgia to have a top 15 passing offense? And that's what Georgia has this season. And they've got the wide receivers to match it, even though Georgia has lost a lot of wide receivers. you could point early into the season to some of the mix-ups and route communications and plays and things like that, and that caused a few of the interceptions that Carson has had this year. But make no mistake about it, man, this guy's seeing ghosts. What do you think about the Georgia offense headed into this one? I mean, the most important thing for this team at this point is for Carson Beck to protect the football. And if Carson does that, I trust the offense to be able to get the yardage. I trust them to be able to score the touchdowns. And I think Georgia wins this football game. I think it's plain and simple. But
Yeah.
Carson Beck hasn't showed us that he can do that. And, I'm sure there's a prop bet out there somewhere, folks, but one interception, I might go over because he seems like he's good for two a game at least right this second. What are your thoughts on this offense and going into this matchup against Ole Miss?
Yeah, well, this team and this offense will go as Carson Beck goes, and that's just kind of the reality of Georgia's offense right now. They don't have much of a run game. It's gotten a little bit better as of late, and I do expect them to run the ball a little bit more in this football game. But I think Carson honestly is possibly the most influential player in college football right now, and what I mean by that is, if I were to ask you, Mark, if Carson Beck doesn't throw another pick for the remainder of the season, who would win? Who would win the national championship in your eyes?
It's Georgia, and I've said that on the show, Mason. I think the season ends with him throwing a pick and losing the season for Georgia, or it ends in him hoisting a trophy.
Right. So this one player has the ability to lead this team to a national championship, and that's not uncommon to talk about a quarterback in that sort of light. But it's more of a it's more real for that to be the case for Georgia now than it ever has been for a UGA football program, due to the fact that they haven't really had the weapons to go to outside of Carson, who has struggled. I think his confidence is wavering a bit, not having some of those safety valves to go to, and especially if Trevor Etienne's not able to go in this football game. He's sort of been that one elite player that you can count on for the Georgia offense all season. Last game against Florida, the tight ends didn't show up. Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky, according to Pro Football Focus, were the two lowest rated offensive players for Georgia in that football game. So they were not producing to the point where you're seeing Ben Urosic getting more touches and more attention in that football game than we've seen him get all season. Maybe they get him going, but going up against this Ole Miss defense, I'm really concerned for Carson because we know Ole Miss does a great job with their pass rush. Carson has not been good going whenever he's been off balance or had to escape the pocket or anything like that. Carson is completing under 30% of his passes when he's taking pressure, and it's been really bad. He's throwing all of these picks are coming in situations where he's getting hurried or he's getting pressure on him. The pocket is collapsing. So to me, the Georgia offensive line has a tall task in blocking the Ole Miss defensive line up front, giving Carson the opportunity to throw the football. Do they stand up to the task? That's kind of the bigger question to me, because I think if you're giving Carson a pocket to work in where he can get to his third, maybe fourth read, then that's when Carson is elite. That's when you see the first round talent come out. When he hasn't been able to get to that third, by the time he gets to the third, if he's having to shift and get out of the pocket, that's where he's making mistakes. So as much pressure as we're putting on Carson Beck right now, I think that equally the pressure needs to go to this offensive line. And this is the toughest defensive line that they've faced all season. So how do they respond? That's a big question for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you said something that kind of reminded me of what I was thinking this week, and I want to see what your thoughts are too. I don't have any science to back this up. I don't have a bunch of stats to back this up. But doesn't it seem like Carson Beck just doesn't have a check down this year? It's like, where's the check down running back? And maybe it's because these running backs are having to stay in and help with pass pro. I don't know. I'm asking, and you fans let me know in the comment section. But it seems like in years past, there's always been that safety valve, right? That Georgia quarterbacks have been able to hit, and sometimes, to their demise. Sometimes they'd hit that safety valve whenever you felt like they had a wide receiver open. I'm talking Jake Fromm. I'm talking Stetson Bennett. And it's part of running an offense. If you don't have anything, give it to this guy and let him make somebody miss, right? And instead of doing that and putting the ball in the playmaker's hands, he's putting the ball in the other team's hands by trying to force things that are just flat out not there. And at this point, these defenses are sitting back in these zone coverages and disguising these zone coverages as man. There was multiple situations where Florida did a really good job last week of disguising their coverages, looking like they were in a man coverage, and then dropping back into his zone. And Carson panicked. You could see it. You could see it in his feet. And honestly, Mason, the mental fortitude that I felt like was missing in this one. Carson. I compared it, and it reminded me of what we saw Stetson Bennett go through in 2021. And there was an emotional outburst from Stetson Bennett in 2021 whenever he finally got over the hump and Georgia was able to, win a national championship. And I mean, you literally saw the man go to tears on the sideline and be held by other grown men on the team there. Um, I think it just goes to show the amount of pressure that these guys are under. The amount of pressure that it is to play quarterback at the University of Georgia is absolutely immense. And Carson doesn't seem to be in the best frame of mind right now. And I guess is kind of my point in all this. And I feel like we saw Stetson go through this at Georgia, and then we saw Stetson kind of break out the other end of it. Um, so I hope that that's the ending that we're going to see for Carson Beck, because I feel like the guy has tried to be as even keel as possible, but his emotions are starting to show on his sleeve. Whenever he's making some of these bad decisions, he's going straight to the sideline, sitting on the bench, throwing his head back. And Mason, that's just not being a leader, I get it. I'm as competitive as anyone, and I get pissed off when I mess up, and a lot of us do, but you got to be a professional, man. I mean, this kid's driving a Lamborghini to work every day. Let's act like you've been there before, and you need to be going and patting your teammates on the butt and saying "my bad" and let's go. We're gonna go get it. And instead, I feel like this guy's on the sideline, kind of feeling sorry for himself, and there's really no time or place for that during that 60 minutes. So I really wish that they would get that addressed, and get that fixed. And I know that Kirby is, that's something that Kirby's working on. And it's really funny if you listen to Kirby Smart in his post game press conferences. And I heard somebody else say this, so I won't take credit for it, but I thought it was a good point. The worse you play at Georgia, the better Kirby Smart talks about you in the post game press conference. The better you play at Georgia, the worse Kirby talks about you. In 2021 and 2022, Kirby Smart would show up in press conferences and talk about how bad the defense played at practice today. You know what I'm saying? And we have a Carson Beck situation where he's not playing well, and Kirby's talking about how he loves how Carson gets us in the right plays at the right times and blah blah blah. That crap doesn't matter if you're throwing a pick right after, right? So anyway, it's just observations from a Georgia fan, and Carson needs a safety valve in this offense, and it doesn't seem like there is one. Whereas last year, Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers didn't have 1,000 yards apiece last year. I've heard a million people ask me, "What's Georgia going to do without those guys this year?" And my answer has been, there somebody else is going to get those catches and those yards. I mean, that's the reality of it. But the situational stuff is where we miss those guys. Third down, getting to the sticks, things like that. Safety valve. When things break down, throw it out wide to one of these guys. Georgia doesn't really have that. So, whereas some of those offensive stats have looked pretty good this season, it's been a rocky road. All right, let's keep going. We can get caught on Georgia all stinking day. Let's talk about this Ole Miss defense here for a minute, Mason. You kind of alluded to how good that defensive line is, and they've been really, really, really good. 41 sacks this year. Are you kidding me? That is unbelievable. First in America, 94 tackles for loss. this team's done a great job penetrating the line of scrimmage and getting back there and causing havoc. Now, not all of these stats are against SEC teams and things like that, but I mean, my gosh, man, nobody has played SEC teams all year. 41 sacks, that's crazy. 15 turnovers forced, 7 of those are interceptions. As far as turnovers forced total, that's 26th in the country. Rush yards per carry allowed 2.28, so been really, really good against the rush, and you could figure that to be the case with that defensive line that you mentioned. Um, you've kind of already alluded to it, but how do you think this defense matches up? And here's the deal: the pass yards per game allowed and the yards per pass allowed. That's what's interesting to me here, and I'm interested to see how Ole Miss plays this thing because, as you said, Carson Beck hasn't played as well under pressure. Little science fact for everyone, and look, I'm not taking up for Carson Beck because he's been bad, but every quarterback plays worse under pressure, right? Caleb Williams, any Heisman winner you want to look at, if you can get pressure on them, they're not gonna play as good, right?
Mhm.
Does Ole Miss bring pressure in this game and allow Georgia to run their routes and things like that? This hasn't been the best, secondary situation. So I would imagine the game plan probably stays the same. You don't want to give Carson Beck a bunch of time to sit back there and throw into the secondary that's been somewhat porous. You think they're bringing the heat this weekend?
I think so. I think Pete Golden at first is going to see what they can do with rushing 4 and dropping back. See if they can apply some pressure there at first. Now, I don't think that that's going to work against this offensive line. It hasn't been a perfect year for that unit for sure for Georgia, but they have been pretty good in passing situations. And I don't feel like, as good as Ole Miss's defensive line has been, I don't think that they're going to be able to just rush 4 all game and shut Georgia out or anything like that. So at some point you will see some different packages and whatnot, but I think initially the game plan has to be, don't let them beat us over the top. Now the question is, can Georgia capitalize on that and run the football in a light box? That's a big question to me because if Ole Miss is rushing 4 and they're stopping the run against Georgia, it's going to be a long day for Georgia. Even though they haven't been running the football all that well all season, they need something in this football game to allow them to have a balanced attack and open things up down the field. This is a matchup between the Georgia offense and the Ole Miss defense that is really good on bad and good on bad. I mean, Ole Miss has been really good at stopping the run all season long. Georgia has not been great at stopping the run. And Ole Miss has been pretty porous in the secondary. Georgia's been really good at passing the football. So how do these teams want to handle that? It's honestly a huge question mark for this game, and this side of the football will probably decide the football game because we don't know. I think you can get really creative as a coordinator in this situation because your deficiencies on both sides of the football. What you could attack, but do you want to keep the other defense? Does Georgia want to keep this defense, guessing essentially and run the football more when they give them the light box? And can Carson check down from a running attack when he notices that the box is a little bit more full, or if he can catch some linebackers tiptoeing to the line and throw it over the middle of the field? This is where the chess game is going to be really interesting between the Georgia offense and this Ole Miss defense. I think more so than the other side of the football here.
Yeah, I think you're right for sure. All right, let's talk about this Ole Miss offense, and it's been a really good one, specifically passing the football this season. It'll be interesting to see what's up with Trey Harris, right? Does he play? What's his status? Is he 100%? If he does play, they've got some options behind him though. Caden Lee's been really good. Jordan Watkins has been really good. Juice Wells has very similar stats to Jordan Watkins. I think 23 receptions for him, a few less yards or whatnot. Jordan Watkins played really, really well last week. Caden Lee is a guy that I've been kind of paying attention to this year because he's a Georgia boy himself. He's a Kennesaw, Georgia native, and a young fella that's really kind of bust onto the scene there in that Lane Kiffin offense. But the straw that stirs this drink is obviously Jackson Dart. 3,210 yards already this season. There was years as a Georgia fan where I just begged for one of our quarterbacks to get over 3,000 yards for the season. This guy's already at 3,210. I threw for 500 last week. It seems like the offense is, for the most part, well oiled. But then again, they played Arkansas, who turned the ball over a couple times last week and provided them with some, short fields and momentum. And then Ole Miss took care of the rest. Right, it was an absolute onslaught. But you can see some of the passing stats there, pretty much first or second in every passing category that you want to look at. Not only are they efficient passing the ball, they're explosive as well. Over 120 plays of 10+ yards passing this season. That is incredible. And somehow that's second in America. But 120 plays of 10+ yards, that is absolutely incredible. And you can kind of see where the bulk of their yardage comes from. Yards per pass, 11.2, 377 yards per game is really, really outstanding stuff. And they're going to be matched up against a really good defense. Here's my question, Mason. You can't be a one-trick pony against this Georgia defense, not typically, unless you just have NFL wide receivers on each side and an NFL quarterback. And as much as I like Jackson Dart, I don't know that is necessarily this situation. So my point was saying all that is, and I'm not trying to demean the Ole Miss offense, as it's done everything that it's needed to do this season for the most part, minus I guess the Kentucky game. How are they gonna be able to run the ball and kind of throw any kind of change up here? That's kind of my concern and question. And beyond that, I'll go ahead and flip to the next slide. This is a matchup that I'm really concerned with here as well for Ole Miss, Mason. Is this Georgia defensive line versus this offensive line for Ole Miss, and this kind of ties into the rush game. It ties into pass protection, all that stuff. We've got some guys that, Caleb Warren didn't start last week, right? So you had a Reese McIntyre in it. I don't know. I don't know who's playing this week and who's not. I know Nate Kalepo was hurt. So you had somebody stepping up in his spot. I think it was Jerquan Scott was the guy that stepped up in his spot. So this hasn't been the best offensive line group in the country this season. Allowed 19 sacks so far, allowed 49 tackles for loss. Both of those are 82nd, 83rd in the country there. And then on top of that, you've got some injuries here. And across the line of scrimmage from them is going to be a Georgia defensive line group that I really feel like has came into its own really over the last 3 weeks or so, as far as, getting healthy and really kind of coming into their own and playing some dominant football, really for the first time this season, I think over the last 3-4 weeks. And boy, they just look really dominant, right? So where's the changeup going to come from this Ole Miss offense? We know they like to throw the football, but if you think you're just going to just throw all game and not have some type of, off speed to throw at this Georgia defense, it's going to be tough to move the ball on them. And the Parrish, the running back, from what I understand, he's hurt. Mm-hmm. And there's another running back hurt behind him, and so it was already a thin room. That's my biggest question. How's this offense going to move against this Georgia defense? And we'll kind of talk about the defense here for Georgia incorporated with this conversation. But how do you think the Georgia defense matches up against this offense? And then I guess more specifically, the D-line against this O-line?
Yeah, well, this is where you're kind of seeing good on good more so. On this side of the football, I think that this is going to be a little bit more of a standard game plan for both teams, really, except for the fact that, like you said, Ole Miss is going to be without Henry Parrish in this football game. So, what kind of running attack do they get now? Jackson Dart is a capable runner with his legs. He can scramble and get some first downs and things like that with his legs. So maybe you incorporate a little bit more quarterback draw in this football game without having your star running back. But I don't really know that you were ever going to run the football all that effectively against this Georgia front with your offensive line being as really as poor as they've been all year. That this unit is not good. It's the worst unit on the field on either side of the football. Is this offensive line for Ole Miss? That's what concerns me for Ole Miss in this football game. We saw Georgia just absolutely open up a can of whoop ass against Texas, and we think Texas is a pretty good offensive line. Now, since that game, they haven't looked as good. But going into that football game, we were saying that was one of the best offensive lines in the country, if not the best. So, given that and the fact that Georgia didn't play the same game against Florida, they were much more conservative on defense. I think that they were saving some of those packages for this football game, knowing that Ole Miss would be a tougher challenge. And can Georgia take advantage of this weak offensive line for Ole Miss? I tend to think that they will. And if that's the case, are they getting to the quarterback, or is he escaping and running free and getting first downs and things like that with his legs? We're going to have to see, and really on both quarterbacks, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them just throughout the game and in general to win the team to win the football game for their team. I'm concerned with Jackson Dart in this football game, especially if he doesn't have a Trey Harris to throw to. It doesn't seem like Juice Wells is really like that guy that he once was. I think he's a capable piece and a great wide receiver 3, but if you don't have Trey Harris, does Caden Lee step up and be that number 1? You got an NFL tight end and pre-scoring, is what's his effectiveness in this football game? We haven't seen tight ends be all that effective against Georgia in years past, but maybe this is a game where one of them goes off for 100 yards or so. Make no mistake, this is a really good offense for Ole Miss. We saw them just absolutely pick apart the defense of Arkansas, but I think Georgia has a much better secondary than Arkansas does. I think they're better when they're healthy up front than Arkansas. They definitely have better linebackers than Arkansas. So totally different unit here. Nobody's expecting Jackson Dart to throw for 500 yards in this football game or anything like that anyways. But what do we see out of the Ole Miss offense? Does it look more like it did against a good defense in South Carolina, where they scored? It was only 27 points that they scored, but their defense held up and held South Carolina to 3 points. Or do we see the offense for Ole Miss look more like they did against Kentucky, who's another good defense, and they really struggled in that football game? Obviously, lost in the football game, but that offense for Ole Miss really struggled there. So I'm anxious to see. I think both of these teams are tested. Georgia more tested on the road, I think, than Ole Miss. At this point in the season, I feel like this game is a toss-up. I mean, I really do. I think Ole Miss has an advantage with this being at home. Georgia is going to have a clearer path to get to the quarterback, I think, than Ole Miss will in this football game. And I think that could ultimately decide it. It's this side of the football for Georgia and their ability to get up for these types of football games. Anxious to see what sort of packages they have, though, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think Georgia defensively has just got this huge advantage at the linebacker position, right? That Ole Miss will not have seen a linebacker group quite like this one. Especially the healthier this team gets, it's really pretty sick, honestly.
Well, and CJ Allen just played probably his best game of his career against Florida, so he's getting better.
He's figuring it out, and what I love so much about CJ Allen, and I think what Kirby loves so much about him, he's got Roquan-esque speed from sideline to sideline, and
absolutely,
that's something that you just can't teach that. And I think Kirby at the beginning of the season saw that with him and said, you know what, I'll take the good with the bad, and I'll fix the bad right over time. And CJ Allen's going to be a first round pick eventually. And I'm confident in that. It's just he's got to build up more of that awareness. He's not the field general that Roquan Smith was. Roquan Smith knew what was happening before the snap a lot of times, and that's the piece that's missing with CJ Allen. And I think that Kirby is going to be able to teach him that part, and he's got all the God given ability. But and hence why Jamon Dumas Johnson decided to take off to Lexington, right? And probably saw that for himself, I would imagine. Um,
Well, and
yes,
and I think while we're just talking about the Georgia linebacker group, this is a unit that's excelling and doing really well this season without a first round draft pick in Smile London as well. I think people, Georgia fans included, are kind of forgetting that this guy's been out since the Alabama game, and he will be back at some point this year, and that's going to boost this defense even more because, I mean, he's got all the experience and the God-given talent that plays a different style. But you talk about a linebacker in pass protection. I don't know that there's anybody better in the country than Smile London in his ability to read offenses and all that as well. So. He won't be ready for this game, but at some point this year, maybe it may take he may not come back till the playoffs or conference championship or something like that. But at some point, Georgia's getting a boost as well in that linebacker room.
yeah, it seems like the Georgia defense has gotten deeper as the seasons went on, which is weird. And
Yeah.
more guys have been able to get experience, and that's helped as well. There's been a couple of times this season where there's been defenders on the field that I didn't even know who the hell they were. So there's been some experience to be had and gained, and this group seems to be getting deeper as the season goes on. What's your prediction here, Mason? I'll just tell you right now. This game was lopsided last year, and it was at Georgia. And while I don't think that Georgia has got the firepower to put up 52 on this Ole Miss defense that I feel like is much improved since last season, I don't see where Ole Miss has made enough improvements for me to be able to take their side on this one and pick Ole Miss to win this football game. I think Georgia is probably still a touchdown better than Ole Miss at this point, even at their place. It's all going to depend on Carson Beck and his ability to protect the football, though, Mason. One interception is one thing. Look, Georgia has played, a series of games here lately where they've turned the ball over an immense amount and won these games by large margins, right? And it doesn't really, it defies college football physics. I mean, and to think that Georgia can't keep playing football this way, Mason. I mean, it's going to bite you in the butt. You can't turn the ball over 3 or 4 times a game and expect to keep winning by 2 touchdowns. That's not reality. And
Yeah.
Ole Miss is not that football team, and I'm pretty confident in that. So, with all that being said, this is Ole Miss in wounded animal mode here with 2 losses already. But I think Georgia can go in here, and I think Georgia can get this win. Last I checked, Ole Miss ain't Alabama, and Georgia beats everybody that's not named Alabama. And they've done so for about 4 calendar years now. There's no reason for me not to bet on Georgia. So give me Georgia, and I guess minus 2.5. Yeah, even though I think this will be a close one, I think a field goal win is pretty probable. The over-under will be something that I'll probably talk about on the Thursday betting show. So y'all come join us on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, for Between the Lines, and that's our weekly best bets show for college football betting. What's your bet on this one, dude?
Well, I've got Georgia winning as well. For all the hesitation that I had in the Texas game, I think Georgia just completely proved me and everybody wrong in that, and had an absolute dominant performance. And they proved that time and time again that they get up for these football games. So until they give me a reason to bet against them, I'm not going to do it unless there's a team named Alabama that's lining up against them. So I'll just go ahead and tell you for the rest of the season, Mark, until Georgia loses a game, I'm taking Georgia to win and more than likely cover in a lot of those cases. But to me, what's most intriguing about this matchup is that, for Ole Miss, if you lose, you're out. There's no other game on your schedule that you can point to and say we deserve to be in because we beat that team. At this point, you've lost to Kentucky, you've lost to LSU, now you've lost to Georgia at home. There's no coming back from this. So if Lane Kiffin loses this football game, does he end up being the coach for the Florida Gators next season? I think that's a big question. And now, if you listen to some of the talk around the Florida program, they're pretty confident that Billy Napier is going to keep his job after this season with the work that he's done, with the injuries that they've had to sustain. There's growing belief that he's safe for this season. However, I think a lot of that has to do with who's available, who's available to hire, and if Lane Kiffin loses this football game, and they want to just kind of kick the tires on that, and he agrees to something, I think that's a situation where you could see Florida kind of go ahead and make that change, even though they feel okay with Billy Napier at the moment. If you got Lane Kiffin, who's been their guy for the entire season, I mean, even the preseason, it seems like Florida has kind of had Lane Kiffin in their crosshairs. What could happen there? You know what I mean? That if he does lose his football game, if he wins, well then, if Lane Kiffin wins his football game, and Ole Miss, wins, I think that they're in the college football playoff, and there's no real talks going on for months because they're going to be playing pretty much through the month of December. So I don't see it happening if Lane Kiffin's able to pull this one out. So to me, there's more riding on this than just this season. Is kind of the point I'm getting at here.
Yeah, and look at this mess that's going on here in the SEC, Mason. I mean, you've got Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Texas, LSU, all with one loss in the conference. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't even seem like this would be possible. Now, it's going to be impossible for it to end this way because Texas and Texas A&M are going to play each other in the last game of the season. Georgia and Tennessee are going to play each other next week, and Georgia and Ole Miss are playing this weekend. So Georgia has a chance, definitely, over the next two games to catch an L. There's no doubt about that. This week, as I said, is on the road and then going to host in Athens the Tennessee Volunteers. So really, Mason, I think what it's boiling down to in the SEC here is, and I think you're right. Obviously, Ole Miss wins this game. I think they go to the playoff. And Georgia, if they lose this game, then they got to turn around and win the next one against Tennessee and ruin their season. And then that would really make the picture clearer. But we both predicted Georgia to win this one. So what I think is going to end up happening is that Texas A&M game, the winner of that's going to go to the SEC championship, and the and Georgia Tennessee game, I think the winner of that game is going to have the inside track to go to the SEC championship as well. But we all have to remember that Tennessee, if they were to win that game there in Athens, they've still got to beat Vanderbilt at the end of the season, and that game is going to have a ton of pressure. Let's think about this too, guys. What if Georgia beats Tennessee? Tennessee's got 2 losses, and then they've got to play Vanderbilt at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And then Vanderbilt has got Tennessee up against the wall, possibly knocking them out of the college football playoff. We've got some really interesting SEC matchups that are coming up, and this league has beat each other up, man. There's really good teams in this league. Some real good offenses, some real good defenses. I would say more better defenses than offenses this year, but good group of teams. They're beating each other up. It's going to be a really entertaining last few weeks here in the SEC as we get ready to go into December. All right. Thank y'all guys so much for watching. Certainly do appreciate it. If you would, like the video for us real quick. Takes 2 seconds. It's free. Helps us out like so much. Certainly would appreciate it. Sorry we're a day late, guys, but we are here. We are going to go right back to Tuesday next week. We're not going to make a habit out of this. But, just a little insight. We're not filming a segment. I own a little small business, and I had somebody call in yesterday. So guess what? Guess who's next on deck? It's your boy. I got to go to work whenever they call my name. So, it is what it is. But I appreciate y'all tuning in here on a Wednesday. And by the way, saw some of you over at Uncle Lou's show yesterday. So I see you're cheating on us. I'm kidding. I don't care. Please, by all means, go watch Uncle Lou's show over there. I just thought it was funny. Double O'Neill's not in here right now, I don't think. But and you guys drop your comments in the comment section. Let us know what you think about these games. Y'all are super quiet tonight, which is fine. But let us know what you think. But Double O'Neill was over there on Uncle Lou's show last night, and
Playing some zombies.
I don't know what he was doing, but he had commented something, and Uncle Lou called him Double O'Neill. And I was like, Double O'Neill? I think he meant Double O'Neill. I know that guy. So anyway, small world out here in the YouTube community. To be so many billions of views every day that YouTube has, it's really kind of a small world. All right, let's jump into this next one. We've got Alabama and LSU coming up on deck, locked and loaded, ready to go. SEC showdown. Let's do this. I didn't realize how SEC heavy we are today, Mason. We've got 3 SEC matchups and then a bicycle matchup. So,
well, that's why I said it's the best conference. I mean, they got the best football games to watch. So
there's actually zero doubt about that. If y'all want to go look at the viewer ratings of these SEC games versus those Big Ten games, it's not even close. It's not even close, man. I don't know what the Big Ten is doing with the whole the big noon thing. I mean, you got to get rid of that, right? I mean, that is so counterproductive. It's not even funny. We're going to take our biggest game of the week and we're going to put it on when everybody just woke up, when it's 9 o'clock on the West Coast. That doesn't make any sense, man. I don't understand why somebody would pay $1 billion TV contract and then put your best games on at noon on Saturday. That doesn't make any sense to me. But part of it too, though, I do have to say is some of those teams out in the Big Ten having night games in November is a little more challenging. But you can still do 3:30. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to do late. But I digress. One of the many things
they're running from the SEC games that are at 3:30 in prime time. You know.
Yeah. Whatever. Well, in this day and age, people watch 5 games at once. So I don't know what they're, let me put it on one of my screens. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's jump into it. This is a big one, and this is one that very interesting to me. So let's jump into it. Y'all let us know in the comment section what you're thinking about this one, because I am on the fence here on this one, and probably going to take me right down to Thursday to figure out what I really, really want to bet on this one, if anything. Alabama at LSU. It's a rivalry that rings true to any real SEC fan or college football fan that's watched over the last 10, 15, 20 years, however long you really want to go back and look at it. These teams at times have traded winning national championships, traded winning SEC championships over the last couple of decades. A couple of real storied teams. It's the Crimson Tide. It's the Tigers. It's a night game there in Death Valley. It's a big one. LSU is a 3-point underdog, Mason. They're an underdog at home at LSU at night. You don't see this very often. Over-under is set at 58.5. This LSU team has been undefeated under Brian Kelly in games at night there in Death Valley, which goes along with the trend that we've known for many, many years that it's very hard to win there in that time slot. No matter how good LSU is or bad LSU is, it's tough to win there. This game is going to have some offensive firepower, I do believe, Mason. The over-under, as I said, set at 58.5. I think these two offenses are going to be able to eat in this one. This isn't historically the best defenses that we've seen for these two teams, and this game means a whole heck of a lot. LSU's got a couple of losses this season, one of which is not in the SEC, so they're still sitting fairly pretty as far as the SEC race goes. They do not own a tiebreaker over Texas A&M, which they lost to, obviously. So A&M owns that tiebreaker there, but multi-way tie in the SEC. Maybe we'll bring that chart back up here in a minute as we've been looking at it throughout our live show here on First and Long. Let's jump into the offense first for Alabama, and we'll kind of go group by group here for each team, and just kind of our thoughts on this team as the seasons went on. And Alabama has lost a couple of games themselves Mason, and it's put up or shut up time here for both of these teams, honestly. And I think that's what makes this one all the more interesting. Offensively, I feel like Alabama has taken a little bit of a step back from what we thought they were at the beginning of the season. There was a couple of games there where we saw Alabama, specifically against Wisconsin, who at the time we thought had a bit of a pulse on maybe defense, and Wisconsin has kind of looked better since at times, and then kind of looked bad at other times. But in that game, Alabama just absolutely went out to Wisconsin and tore them a new one, and looked really, really, really good. And then the first half of the Georgia game, Alabama came out and just ripped Georgia apart. I mean, in an embarrassing fashion, absolutely, actually. And it really all started to kind of go downhill as that second half of that Georgia game went on. Georgia was able to move the football, score some points, and the pressure built, and the pressure built, and the pressure built. And Georgia goes ahead with a couple minutes left, and then Alabama is able to win that football game. But man, ever since that moment, it's been tumultuous to say the least. And there's been questions of culture issues. There's been questions of coaching philosophy with this personnel group that they've got here. I'm interested to see what Alabama shows up in this football game. Uh, LSU has been pretty bad against the pass this year, Mason. Defensively, we'll kind of go through their stats in a minute, but I think Alabama is going to have ability to be able to throw the football in this game some if the wide receivers are able to get on their game and get on the same page with Jalen Milroe. So I expect Alabama to score some points through the air and be able to hit some explosives, which they've been pretty decent at this season. Pass plays of 20 plus yards, they've got 32 of them. That's 32nd in the country, so not bad. The most disappointing thing for this offense, I think, overall, out of everything I've named here this season, is the lack of ability to run the football at times, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me with the personnel that you've got on this team, and the offensive line that was returning here. When this offensive line is healthy, they're star studded, and they haven't been able to run the football as good as what I thought they would, especially with a running quarterback. What have you thought about the Alabama offense this season, and kind of going into this matchup with LSU, who, we've talked about LSU as well defensively? I guess we can kind of flip back and forth. We don't have to stay on one slide. We've talked defensively about LSU this season and the improvements that we've seen. There are players that are in place to make plays, whereas over the last couple of years, not only were people not making plays, but they weren't even in position to make a play. And I feel like, whereas this LSU defense has still like missed tackles and they've been sloppy and they've given up yards in the pass game and in the run game at times, they've been marginally better. But marginally better doesn't do you a whole heck of a lot in the SEC, where there is some powerhouse defenses this year. LSU is still ranked in the bottom half pretty much of every category defensively in the SEC this season, and which therefore is the reason I think this one ends up being pretty high scoring. What are your thoughts, Alabama offensively against this LSU defense? Really, either group. Take it away.
Yeah, well, when you look at the Alabama offense, they're still a very explosive offense in the SEC, which gives me a little bit of pause going up against the defense for LSU. Look, this defense is 86 in the country in pass yards given up per game. Now, Alabama has struggled on offense in some cases, but they do a great job of getting the big plays when they need the big plays. And that's kind of my concern for this LSU defense. What are they going to give up on the back end? I still think that the secondary, although it is improved, they're not great. And the pass rush up front, I think a lot of their success has come against worse offenses. So while I do like the pieces up front and the pass rush that they've been able to provide for this defense, I think that going up against the Alabama offensive line could be a little bit of an issue. The offensive line is definitely better suited in run blocking, which is surprising because they don't run the football. It seems like the offense for Alabama has not been playing to their strengths all that well. But how does LSU get the pressure on Jalen Milroe? This is an offensive line for Alabama that has given up a bunch of sacks, particularly to great defensive fronts. I look at South Carolina and the pressure that they were able to bring. Is LSU going to be able to play to a similar level and provide that pressure to help out the back end of this defense? That's a big question for me. I think that they've been better in the run game for the most part, but is better good enough in this football game to keep Alabama honest, to keep them kind of playing a balanced approach, or are they going to be able to run the football more effectively than they have in previous games? I'm still waiting for whatever reason. I'm still waiting for the Alabama offense to run the football better. It seemed like they were geared up for that going into this football season. They were going to run the football more and be really strong in that aspect, and it just hasn't come to fruition yet. They've been really relying on a freshman wide receiver who is extremely talented, but I think maybe a little bit too reliant on a guy like that. And now, if you know that Alabama's going to drop back and throw the ball a ton, also it allows you to bring more pass rush, and you're seeing teams get home on Alabama now. So I'm excited to see what LSU defense shows up. Do we see an LSU defense that plays like they did in the first half against Texas A&M, or do we see the defense that played like they did in the second half against Texas A&M, where they were worn out because the A&M offense was, or the LSU offense was turning the ball over. Garrett Nussmeier was turning the ball over a ton and giving short position to Texas A&M. But nonetheless, there were still some sloppy things there from that defense. So a lot more unknowns. I think having that extra bye week before this game gives Blake Baker probably the upper hand on defense. We've seen this defense get, for the most part, better and better all season long, minus the one bad half against Texas A&M. I feel like we could see another pretty strong outing from the LSU defense here. If Alabama's not getting the run game involved a little bit more, I feel like the advantage would go to LSU in this one.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think you're probably right. Let's talk about this LSU offense, and we kind of grazed over it there. It's been really good in the passing game. The rush game has been a question, and every time I think that LSU figures out something as far as the rushing game, they end up going against the team that shuts it down for the most part, right? And Texas A&M did a good job of shutting that rush offense down for LSU, and it's been a weakness. There's no doubt about that. As good as this offensive line has been, they haven't been particularly great at jumping out into run blocking schemes and being able to road grade defenses or anything like that. So they're good in pass pro, haven't been that great in run protection. And this LSU offense is like Georgia's in the sense that, you don't need a 200-yard rushing day. I mean, everybody would love to be able to rush for 200, but that's not reality. You need to be able to run the ball efficiently, and the rushing efficiency for LSU has went down as the season has went on, down to 4.23 yards per carry, and that's only good for 78th in the country. And you got to be closer to 5 for the season, because you got to remember those season numbers. I mean, that's including the mom and pops that you played, the popcorn states, so you need to be a little closer to 5 to really be considered efficient rushing the football, and LSU hasn't been able to do that. And that's the last piece for this offense. I mean, let's just be honest. If they had a rush attack that they could rely on, and I know that some of that's due to injury and attrition and things like that in that running back room, but Durham needs to come out here and be able to establish some type of run game for this offense. And I think that that's possible, as Alabama has not been particularly great against the run, which is surprising. And we'll talk about, and we can come back to the LSU offense, but let's talk about that defense. This is kind of just a brain scramble to me, Mason, because we looked at this defense in the offseason and we said, good, not great defensive line, great linebacker room, and extremely inexperienced secondary. That's what we said in the preseason. And then I come back and I do the stats this week and I start looking, and this secondary has been what's kept this defense out of the fire. This
Mhm.
secondary going out and getting interceptions, and I believe it's 12 interceptions so far this year of their 18 turnovers forced, which is good for 6th in the country, by the way. Um, this secondary has bailed this defense out, and they are young. And now, you've got the USC transfer there. You've got Malachi Moore, who's the player coach of this team, right? Deontay Lawson, number 32, is pictured there on your screen. He has been the leading tackler for this team at the linebacker position this season. So no, he's not in the secondary, but you get my point. Um, it's been a surprising result put on the field, I guess. Final product put on the field for this defense so far this season. Um, just not what we're necessarily used to seeing from Alabama, I guess, from Alabama standards as far as stopping the run and things like that. But they figured out ways to make it up in other aspects. And you got to tip your cap to Kane Womack, who I feel like has done a pretty good job. Opponent pass plays of 20 plus yards, only allowed 19 of those this season. So that's going to come into handy in this game. And I'm really interested to see with Garrett Nussmeier kind of hitting the skid in that last game in that second half. What is his momentum like? Is he going to have a shooter's mentality of let me forget about that and come back out here and keep shooting, keep shooting the ball here to use a basketball reference? Or is this Alabama secondary going to continue to do what they've done this season and take the ball away from teams that try to go over the top of them? So that'll be really interesting, in my opinion, to see because this Alabama secondary, they've let receivers run open. It's not like they've shut down the pass game, but it's almost like they let you play into a trap eventually, and then catch you in the trap. So been interesting to watch. I'm interested to see how that plays out against this LSU offense that I think is really really good. What do you think about that matchup in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm concerned about Nussmeier. He's been turning the ball over through the air at quite an alarming rate, similar to Carson Beck. Even they're 111th in the country in interceptions given up, and Alabama is 14th in the country at getting interceptions. So that is a matchup to watch for sure in this football game. I think that this is one aspect that excuse me, if LSU could tighten up, I think it could win them this football game. However, if they continue to unravel and continue to turn the ball over, I think that it could be one of those padlock stats that Alabama ends up winning the football game on. Can you win the turnover battle in this football game if you're LSU? I think that I would lean to Alabama in that aspect, and that would certainly hurt their cases here. But also, on Alabama and their defense, I do feel like as really as poor from a total season standpoint. If you look at the stats from the entire season for Alabama up front on defense, it hasn't been great. It hasn't been a good run stopping defense or anything like that. I do think that they played. They played lights out against Missouri, and I understand Missouri's offense is pretty bad, and they're not great up front on the offensive line. But I saw some good things from those playmakers that we expected to see a lot out of in this football game, or for this football team in Alabama. And so I do think between that and doing some nice things up front against Tennessee, getting another bye week for that unit up front, I think really helps them out. And I'm anxious to see if they continue to play better up front, because even though we know that LSU hasn't been running the football all that well, we've also seen Caden Durham have sort of a boomer bust kind of mentality, I guess, going into these games, and potential there to boom on some plays and get some big chunk plays and some yardage in the running game. What do we see out of that? What does that matchup look like? If LSU runs for 150 plus in this game, I think that could be enough to win it if Nussmeier is protecting the football and they're able to win the turnover battle as well. I'm just really concerned with his headspace in this football game after all the turnovers, after he has to feel like he lost the football game for them against Texas A&M. What is his headspace like going into this football game? Because I know that the mentality for the secondary of Alabama is to go out and eat, and that they're ball hawks, man. They're a young group, but they're very talented. They got a little bit of experience with Malachi Moore and a transfer, but this is a unit that can absolutely disrupt a football game and get turnovers. They're pretty special when it comes to locating the football in the air and making plays.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's get into our predictions for this one. It's hard for me to bet against LSU at home at night, man. I mean, this is just what Alabama hasn't proven to me enough this season. Now, as you said, I'm a little bit worried about what we see from this offense, from LSU in this game. We see quarterbacks go on skids all the time, man. I mean, it does happen pretty much every year to just about every quarterback at some point. Can he get up off the ground, pick himself up and dust himself off and be able to go out there like nothing happened? I think that's the mentality that he's going to have because this entire offense, we've talked about it with Georgia. It's the same for LSU. The entire offense is on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders, right? It all runs through him and his ability to spread that ball around and that offensive line to protect him enough to do so. I think the offensive line is going to be able. I think they're going to be fine in this one as far as being able to get him protected and everything. But we'll see what his headspace is like. Give me LSU, man. I do think that this is going to be more of a higher scoring football game. I could see the offenses really kind of coming alive in the second half, maybe of this football game. Um, I haven't seen Alabama make a lot of good halftime adjustments this season. So I think that LSU, I think schematically and maybe coaching wise, they may have an advantage in this one as far as getting into halftime and being able to make some adjustments. Now we saw LSU come out in the second half of the Texas A&M game and got out coached. But I think LSU's got a chance to be able to if they can keep everything intact in that first half, go into halftime, come out in the second half, and be able to run their program offensively on this Alabama defense there at home. So tough to go into Death Valley and win. Give me LSU +3. I'm probably not actually going to bet my actual hard-earned dollars on this game. I just think there's too many possible outcomes here. I think I'm more interested in the over/under, but I want to dissect that number a little bit more and kind of play this one out in my head and see how I feel like it's going to play out score-wise as the week goes on. But what's your thoughts on this one? What's your predictions? I like LSU at home.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean more into the fact that Nussmeier is prone to making mistakes, and Alabama is really good at capitalizing on those mistakes. I'm going to go with Alabama in this game, and I know it's Death Valley. It's a night game. It's the toughest place to win in, but at some point somebody's got to do it, right? And I like the position that Alabama is in right now. And I really feel like they're going to win the turnover battle. And when you're Nussmeier and you don't have a running game to rely on, what's your next best option in the passing game? It's going to be your tight end. Well, this tight end, Mason Taylor, who I love, I think he's one of the best in the country, can struggle against this linebacker group or against the nickel for Alabama. So I think that he's a little bit of a non-factor in this football game and somebody that has been reliable in some big game situations. I do think it's going to be really close. This could end up being an overtime type of game. But I'm going to go with the favorites here and fade the road dogs on this one. I think that the magic for Death Valley at night kind of runs a little bit thin in this one, and the Crimson Tide are able to get it done.
Very well. Thank y'all so much for watching. I certainly appreciate it. Y'all drop your comment in the comment section. We got a quiet crew tonight, Mason. They're just watchers, not talkers, which is okay. We certainly do appreciate it. But we would ask that you hit that thumbs up button. Just help us out. That thumbs up button actually is what keeps the lights on around here, believe it or not. So if you could do that, that'd be a big help. Thank you. All right, man. Let's jump through these last couple. I can't stop thinking about deer hunting. I'm ready to go deer hunting in the morning. I keep thinking about the weather. I'm like, all right, dude. As soon as that rain cuts out, man, it's gonna be good stuff. Let's see. So which one you got pulled up there, Mason?
We can start with South Carolina at Vanderbilt.
South Kakalaki against Vandy Tandy. All right, let's do it.
I thought that's how we were starting.
Nothing. Well, I mean, if it would have worked, maybe. But Vandy Brandy, Vandy Sandy, nothing's that good that rhymes with Vanderbilt. So I went with
Just
Vandy.
so
That didn't work.
We'll start with the South Carolina offense versus the Vandy defense, and then I'll flip it.
Okay. All right. You said South Carolina offense versus Vandy defense, right?
Yep.
All right. South Carolina at Vanderbilt. It's an SEC matchup, and it's a lot bigger than what people would have thought it would have been as the season began here in 2024. Thanks for tuning in to the First and Long College Football Show. I'm your co-host, Marcus, joined by my co-host, Mason. We're deep diving into this one today. Look, this is a couple of teams that have exceeded expectations this year, Mason, by a lot. This has been an outstanding season for Vanderbilt, 6-3 so far this season, able to get wins over some big SEC foes, right? Some teams that you can't consider them SEC rivals, right? Because to be rivals, you've got to have kind of both sides able to get some wins here and there. Vanderbilt is able to do that in 2024, and now they're going to be hosting the South Carolina Gamecocks, who have had one of the best defenses, specifically one of the best defensive lines in the SEC this season. This is going to be an awesome matchup, and I'm glad that we're able to break this one down in our big game portion of our show here. We typically come on Tuesdays. We did Wednesdays this week. Tuesdays, we do big game breakdowns. So on Sundays, earlier in the week, we do smaller game breakdowns. This one was on Sunday. And then after what happened last weekend, South Carolina able to thrash, Texas A&M there towards the end of that football game, and Vanderbilt able to beat Auburn. We were like, heck yeah, dude, we got to put this on our big game matchups. And we've got South Carolina ranked in our top 25 right now. We've had Vandy in and out, kind of on the verge, honorable mentions of the top 25 throughout the season. So really, really exciting stuff. South Carolina, 3.5 point favorite in this one, over under set at 45.5. Diego, let's go South Carolina offense against the Vanderbilt defense first. Last week was really the first time that I looked at South Carolina's offense and thought, wow, that actually looked pretty good. I'm not going to lie. There wasn't many opportunities this season, Mason. And a lot of that has had to do with the offensive line. It's just not been that great at times this season. And last week, this offense was able to really do whatever they wanted to do. They had a very balanced approach to running and passing, about 250 yards of each in that game against Texas A&M. That's a recipe for success on offense, right? Whenever you can be as balanced as possible and keep defenses guessing. And I thought South Carolina did a really, really good job of that last week. Lenora Sellers, while he didn't complete a ton of passes, got chunk plays, right? He was able to hit some chunk plays, limit the mistakes, which was a big, big deal. Anytime you got a first-year starter in the SEC, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. That's just the way that it is. And sometimes even whenever you have a multi-year starter like Georgia does, they make tons of mistakes, right? So it's a tough game that we watch, and it's a tough game these guys play. And Lenora Sellers has figured it out the hard way at times this season. But it seems like South Carolina offensively is playing their best football right now. Rocket Sanders has been an absolute blessing to this offense. And it's really came in the nick of time because Dowell Loggins, I think, was starting to kind of wear thin on some of the South Carolina fans in that fan base with his play calling and things like that. But when execution is bad, the play caller is going to be scrutinized no matter what. When execution is good and successful, then the play caller looks like a genius, right? I'm interested to see how the Vanderbilt defensive line matches up with this South Carolina offensive line, right? I think that is a big part of this. Are you able to stop the run and take something away from the South Carolina offense? I think the number one thing you got to try to take away is the run. South Carolina's a run first football team, right? That's what they're trying to do first and foremost. The passing game has really just kind of started to come along. So, with that being said, is Vanderbilt going to be able to line up and beat this offensive line? And I think the answer to that question is at least 40% of the time, I think they can, if not 50% of the time. So I think we've got a pretty even matchup as far as the South Carolina offensive line versus that defensive line of Vandy. I don't see a super clear advantage there for either one of these squads. And I think that's a lot of what this game is going to boil down to. We're going to discuss the South Carolina defense that's been so stout against the Vandy offense that's been really entertaining to watch with Diego Pavia. But what do you think, Mason, about this offense versus the Vanderbilt defense? Um, if we get more of what we got last week, then I think that South Carolina is going to be in good shape. But you've got to watch out because South Carolina now plays the same situational position that Texas A&M did last week of going on the road after getting an emotional victory at home. This is a letdown spot for South Carolina.
Yeah, potentially. One thing I really like about South Carolina right now, though, is the progression that we've seen from Lenora Sellers. We've been hearing about this guy for a couple of years now, and the South Carolina fan base has said, "Hey, this guy's next year he's going to be ready." They liked him as a recruit before that, and now we're seeing him play better and progress as a quarterback should, as a young quarterback should in his first year. I think that we maybe sold him a little bit short earlier in the year because we expect to see SEC quarterbacks come in and be ready to play and all that. Well, we're starting to see Lenora Sellers come into his own, and I think that that's a really dangerous recipe for the rest of the SEC because if he continues to play, and I know it wasn't a perfect game against Texas A&M, but Texas A&M is a really good defense, much better than Vanderbilt's, I would say. Vanderbilt has been pretty solid, I would say, on the defensive side of the football. But if Lenore Sellers is adding to his repertoire a passing attack, this South Carolina offense can start to really get cooking. I'm a really big believer in Rocket Sanders. I think he's played better as the season has gone on, as he's been getting more touches in this offense and playing within the system. But with Lenore Sellers, I'm kind of wondering if we're not going to see this guy's ceiling before the season's over. How much further can he go? Because it seems like he's got all the tools. He's got a big arm, and now he's starting to learn how to read these defenses and make the right decisions with the football. I think it's a pretty dangerous combination. Couple that with a couple of decent receivers, and I do think that the offense for South Carolina could potentially exploit the weakness on this Vanderbilt defense, and that being the passing attack. One thing that's really helped this Vanderbilt defense out a ton is their offense. Their offense has been able to really keep them off the field and give them the breaks and keep them fresh for the most part, because it is a thin unit or it is a thin team just in general. They don't have 4 stars behind 4 stars or anything like that. So the offense for Vanderbilt has really kind of helped this team out a lot. We'll get to them in just a minute, but the defense has played solid. I mean, I don't know what else you can say about the Vanderbilt defense. They're much improved, and they're playing pretty sound fundamental football. They don't have the athletes that some of these other SEC programs have, but they play within the system really well. and they don't make a ton of mistakes. I think on defense, when they get beat, it's because they got outmanned for the most part. And I'm anxious to see kind of what South Carolina offense shows up and if they can continue to progress like they have the past couple of weeks.
As you said, the soft spot on this Vanderbilt defense is certainly that pass D. And so I think if you're South Carolina, you got to figure out a way to take advantage of that. And I think, as I said before, if you're Vanderbilt and that defense, you got to try to take away something, right? And I think the run game for South Carolina is something that you may have the ability to take away, and it's something that would really kind of put a kind of rain on the parade of that South Carolina offense and what they're looking to do down in and down out for sure. Um, so let's talk about the Vanderbilt offense versus this South Carolina defense, right? Um, there we go. Um, it all runs through Diego Pavia, right? He's obviously the leading passer, but he's also the leading rusher for this team this season. And what an inspiration the guy has been. The moxie, the charisma. He's just fun to watch. He's just flat out fun to watch, and the crew that he brings to the game. Out there, up there in the stands, he's always got a big group of supporters there from his family and everything. And he's just likable, right? He's the likable. I don't want to say the likable loser like the old saying goes, but you know what I mean, the likable underdog, the guy that it's easy to root for him, right? And that's kind of the thing with this Vanderbilt team in general. Is like it's hard to root against Vandy, right? In general, because it's just like it's Vanderbilt. But look, this I don't think this is a great matchup for Vanderbilt here, to be honest with you, Mason. I think the South Carolina defense matches up pretty well with, first of all, the front group of South Carolina matches up well with just about anybody. So, Tonka Hemingway there in the middle, Dylan Stewart, and the other guy, the transfer from Georgia Tech from last year. Those guys
Kennard.
on the Kennard, yeah. I mean, he's been unbelievable. Kennard's been ridiculous, off the chain good. Coming from Georgia Tech, who would have figured, right? I mean, who would have? That's just one of those transfer portal. It goes to show you there's good players on every single team, no matter how bad the team is. Or it used to be that way till they could all just transfer it onto the same 10 or 15 team. But I digress. This defensive line for South Carolina is absolute trouble for anybody, and even greater trouble for offense like Vanderbilt. The offense has been good at sustaining drives, and that has a lot to do with their running quarterback, who his awareness is through the roof. His ability to get to the chains and fall forward is just really second to none this season. He's done a really, really good job. Going to be tough sledding against that group this weekend, the guys that I named. Not to mention, I like the secondary group for South Carolina as well. I like a lot of those pieces. DQ Smith back there amongst the others. I like this group defensively for South Carolina. It's been one of the biggest surprises of the season for me. I consider South Carolina to have definitely a top 20 overall defense, and that defensive line, I would consider them to be top 10 in the country. And Vanderbilt, I'm not sure that Vanderbilt has really faced off against the defense that's built this way. I think Texas is very good. I think Texas is a very good defense. But I think they're built a lot different than the South Carolina, kind of the inverse of one another as far as defensively. South Carolina more stout on the front end, and I would even say on the edges as well. And Texas, I think, is really good in the secondary, and more of the strength of their defense kind of lies back that way. And of course with Anthony Hill. But what are your thoughts on this matchup for this Vanderbilt offense? It's been a great story this season, man. But the the lack of explosivity on this offense, I think, is going to kind of come to bite them in the butt this weekend. I think with South Carolina, you got to be able to hit a long play to be able to kind of back this defense off a little bit. And I'm not sure that'll even back these guys off, because I'm not sure they need to bring a ton of pressure to be able to get pressure, if that makes any sense. What's your thoughts here?
Well, I mean, like I said, this offense for Vanderbilt has been not only the offense for the team, but it's also in a lot of ways been the defense. They play very complementary football. I expect that to continue. I expect them to continue to be able to sustain some drives. Now, going up against South Carolina, that may lead to more field goals than anything else. But to me, if you're Diego Pavia or if you're his coaching staff, I'm just telling the kid, just please do not turn the ball over, because when South Carolina turns the ball over, they score. It's a deadly game that you're playing anytime you go back to pass the football against this unit. As good as they've been up front, South Carolina, that is, that they're really good on the back end as well. This is a pretty complete unit. I would say I like their DBs. I like their nose to the football. They've been really impressive to watch. They play Beamer ball really well, and this is kind of what I mean here. Interceptions, they're 13th in the country. Fumbles at 34th. It's not not bad, not great either. Third in the country in sacks at just about 4 per game there. And then you look at the flip side, the offense for Vanderbilt, they've been pretty good at stopping sacks. That has a lot to do with Diego Pavia and his ability to escape the pocket. Interceptions, they're 9th in the country. They're not giving up a ton of interceptions. He's playing pretty good football, protecting the football, and fumbles as well. They've been pretty good at. So if you're giving me, if these trends continue and you're taking away South Carolina's ability to turn the ball over, and or ability to get the ball, and you're limiting Vanderbilt's ability to turn the ball over, then I like Vanderbilt to be able to continue to sustain these drives and maybe score a touchdown or two against South Carolina. But ultimately, I think that a lot of these drives are going to lead to field goals, which still kind of does their job when it comes to playing complementary football and getting the defense off the field, giving them that time to rest and catch their breath and whatnot. That's, to me, that's an effective game plan for Vanderbilt, and that's what they need to do to be able to succeed in this football game. Keep the defense off the field as much as possible. Kick field goals when you have to, and they're probably going to have to get a turnover or two and win the turnover battle if they're going to win this football game, in my opinion. And going back to what I said, Vanderbilt on offense, on the flip side, you just got to protect the football and continue to drive whenever they can.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's get into our predictions for this one, man. I really like South Carolina here in the spot, and well, it's not really the spot. I'm actually worried about the spot they're in, and what I mean by that is I'm worried about the situation they're in, coming off of a very emotional victory there in their home stadium last weekend. That was emotional, man. I mean, you say what you want to say. That was crazy. South Carolina. I was talking to a Texas A&M fan on our comment section this past week, and they were like, "Man, they beat the brakes off of us," you know. And I told the Texas A&M fan, I said, "Look, it was pretty predictable to see it coming as far as with that South Carolina defense and things." I said, "But going to their place is tough, no matter what. But South Carolina don't get a ton of night games, man.
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about the fact that over the last few years, it just hasn't been something that TV, the people that schedule all the TV stuff have been like, oh, we got to get out there at nighttime. You know what I'm saying? They got one. The crowd was all in it. And I'm sure it was one hell of a party after that game. I mean, it had to have been a top 10 victory there. It should have been. But are you able to shake it off and go on the road now? And I know this isn't some kind of raucous road environment, but this isn't Vanderbilt from the past few years. I mean, this will at least be 50 to 60% Vanderbilt fans in the stadium this weekend. So, you take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying there's some kind of home field advantage for Vanderbilt. We know that's not true. But how do you do going on the road? How do you handle success? That's not something that we've seen South Carolina. I mean, not to put anybody down, but that's not something that we've seen South Carolina had to deal with a lot over the last couple of years. So Really interested to see how the coaching staff and the personnel handle this. But I like South Carolina in this matchup. I think the South Carolina defense, that's the thing, man. I'd be really worried about an offense in this spot. But I think South Carolina's defense travels, right? And that's the old saying, defense travels. I think the South Carolina defense is going to take it on the road. And even if the offense does sputter, I think the defense is going to be able to keep this a low scoring game, over under set at 45.5. So Vegas tends to agree with that. A low scoring one here. And I think South Carolina is able to squeak it out. I could see a 4-point victory here. I think Vegas is all over this line. I think this line is set almost perfectly. Not a lot of wiggle room here, in my opinion. What are your thoughts? I like South Carolina to get the dub here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think when I look at South Carolina in this spot, their defense is going to be hungry in this one. South Carolina feels slighted. I heard Shane Beamer in a press conference this week talk about how he was talking about the motivation factor. I think he was the question that was asked was something along the lines of getting up for this football game, and after such a big win, and he brought up the fact that you guys. He was talking to the media. He said you guys apparently think that Vanderbilt is a top 25 team and South Carolina isn't. And so that's what you guys said. Not me. And so there's a motivating factor there. For South Carolina, I think that Shane Beamer is kind of taking a page out of Kirby Smart's book and trying to play the motivation factor on the road. And everybody's doubting us, even though they're favored in this football game. I think that there's a little bit of motivation there, and South Carolina, Shane Beamer feels slighted. Give me South Carolina to win this game. I think that they do cover the 3.5. I could see it being a field goal game, just with the ability that this Vanderbilt team has to not quit in any football game, no matter who they're going up against. I could see it being really close, but at 3.5, if I'm picking South Carolina to win, I might as well take those points down with me. So give me a South Carolina cover in this one.
Yeah, we'll see what the number does this week. Y'all join us on our Thursday betting show. It's called Between the Lines here on First and Long College Football, right here on our YouTube channel. We do it every Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I may have a play on this one. Let's see if the line moves. I feel like probably move in the favor of South Carolina after that big victory last week. And if so, I may sneak a Vanderbilt bet in there, somebody who has covered the spread a ton this season. And South Carolina has been pretty good as far as that goes, too. So tune in Thursday, and maybe we'll have a play on this one on the spread or over under. Thanks so much for watching. And if you are watching live, I thank you for watching live. I certainly do appreciate it. If you'll like the video, that would help us out a ton. We've got one more game to break down here, and then we're going to cut you guys loose. And there's nothing left to do but do the betting show tomorrow and watch some awesome football this weekend. I think this is going to be – oh, okay. I'm scooting my chair down here. I'm glad I didn't do that in the middle of the video. But I think this weekend is going to be crazy entertaining. Those two big matchups this weekend are huge. 3:30 SEC matchup there, Georgia at Ole Miss, and then I guess night there at LSU. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let me get this burp out of me before we do this last video. All right. Let's jump into the Holy War, shall we? Let me pull up all my junk here. Mason, I want you to pronounce all these Mormon names, okay?
I got it.
I don't know. I'm going to just try to stay away from them. I'm just going to talk about units and not individuals.
Yeah, we're not talking names. I'll talk about BYU, maybe a little bit of Chase Roberts. But we're not going much farther than that.
Gosh, I'm about to daggum pee my pants, too. That's not good. All right. Let's jump into this sucker. BYU is going on the road to Rice-Eccles Stadium to face off against the Utes. and it's a holy war, man. This is a rivalry game, and one that hasn't been played in a little while, right? This game hasn't been played since 2021, back in Provo. Um, Look, this has been one that Utah has really kind of dominated over the last 10. You can look. Utah's won 9 of those last 10 matchups in this one. But this one seems a lot different. It's got a really different feeling around it, Mason, as BYU is undefeated and sitting in pole position to win the Big 12 at this point. I think at this point they would be a lot of people's pick to win that Big 12. But they've got a big speed bump that they got to get over here in what is a top 15 Utah defense this year. Kyle Whittingham, he's one of the best coaches in the game. The last couple seasons have been tumultuous, I guess you'd say. They've been kind of flubbed up. The whole Cam Rising situation has been really up in the air for, I don't know, 24 months now. You know what I'm saying? So that's really kind of been a whirlwind, and the quarterback position has been a tough one to kind of deal with for Utah over the last couple years. But this game's got some historically some really close matchups. We're going to pull up some stats here that we can kind of look at whenever Mason gets those ready. He can put those on the screen. But yeah, man, this is a really interesting matchup in my opinion. I think BYU has got some clear advantages here in this one, Mason. I think BYU's got the clear advantage at that quarterback position, as I mentioned. Retzlaff has been really, really good this season. But the most important or I guess the most impressive part of this BYU team to me, Mason, is the way that they've been able to win in a multitude of different ways this season. Um, uh, they've won with their offense against Oklahoma State. They've won with their defense against Kansas State, Baylor, SMU, a team that has been, now it was earlier in the season, but SMU's been a buzzsaw offensively. I mean, they've scored a ton of points this season under Rhett Lashley and joining the ACC this season. And that's SMU's only loss this season at all, as they're sitting in a pole position there to make it to the ACC championship game. So not only has BYU gone undefeated, but they've beaten ranked teams along the way. They've beaten teams that are contenders in conferences in Kansas State and SMU, as I mentioned. And they've done it with defense. They've done it with offense. They've done it at with game winning drives. They've beaten teams to a pulp. They've done it all this season. So I've been really impressed with the versatility of this group. Now let's look at some of the statistics offensively for BYU. And look, one of the things that I feel like I kind of notice about teams that are so well rounded, you're not always going to have the top of the line stats here and there that you would on a team that specializes in something. I'm not so sure that BYU is specialized necessarily in anything, but like I said, they're just solid. They're just solid and efficient, right? Play complementary football. This Utah defense continues to do what Utah defenses do, right? They've been pretty stingy. Decent rankings in a lot of those categories this year. Been really good against the pass. That makes a lot of sense, right? Been really good at slowing opposing quarterbacks down, allowing 50% completion percentage this season. So super interested to see this matchup. I'm almost scared to death to bet on this thing with the way it's a rivalry game and looking back at some of the scores in this one. I've seen predictions as far as 21-20 on this game. A lot of people expect it to be a close one. I think it's first one to 21 wins this game, Mason. So this BYU offense, you can see where the advantage lies. Statistically, it's mostly with Utah's defense, but I don't think that BYU has to produce a ton of points in this one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, when you look at Utah's offense, which we'll get into here in a minute, they haven't been putting up a ton of points. So what's the number here? Is it 20 points? I think it is. I really do think that it is. The first to 20 wins this football game. And in that case, I think I like BYU's ability to score more than Utah's. The thing about this football game is it's kind of good on good in a lot of ways. Now I do like BYU's defense as well, but when you look at their offense versus Utah's defense, that's definitely good on good right there. My concern is whether or not Chase Roberts is going to get involved in this football game. I think that Utah's ability on the back end of this defense to bracket a one receiver and take them out of the football game is really good. And Chase Roberts is kind of the guy. I mean, after Retzloff, it's Chase Roberts, and outside of him, not a ton of playmakers on this football team. A lot of guys, a lot of Jag pluses, I would say, but nobody that really can be as effective as Chase Roberts, and I would even throw Retzloff in that. I think Retzloff is a Jag plus in a sense. So, is there a potential here for BYU's offense to stall to the point where they're scoring in the teens? I think that there is. I really do feel like there is. This is one of the best defenses that they've faced all season long. And I think that this is a BYU team that has benefited from a fairly easy schedule. Now, the SMU team that they played early in the year is not the same SMU team that we're seeing now. SMU is playing much better football under a new quarterback, and they're also playing better up front on the defensive side of the football. So I think when you look at the offense for BYU, they haven't faced a challenge like this yet. There's potential here for an upset factor because the Utah defense is so good and they've been underperforming. Could this be sort of an opportunity here for the Utah defense to get going? I think a lot of that's going to depend on the offense and how much they're able to drive the football and extend drives and keep the defense off the field and keep them rested. Play complementary football, as we like to say.
Yeah, well, and kind of speaking on the opposite side of this, if you want to pull up the Utah offense there, it's not much to mention. It hadn't been great, that's for sure. You can see some of the rankings there, 70s and 80s, a lot of 70s and 80s there. And so both of the defenses are going to have, I feel like, advantages over these offenses. And that's kind of my point with the whole who gets to 21 first wins this football game. You know what I'm saying? Utah was on a bye week last week. I wouldn't be surprised to see some trickery worked into this thing. And that's what this game's probably going to be about, Mason. Who can get a turnover, right? Who can make the other make a mistake and be able to capitalize off of that turnover, I think would be one. And then who's able to hit a big play, because I think 3 or 4 big plays and a couple of decent drives are probably what wins, total. I'm talking about for both teams. I think that's probably what this game consists of, and in between a whole lot of defense and punting. So I think Utah is going to be able to add in a couple of wrinkles here on offense, and I think they're going to be able to. They're not going to go out there and get goose egged in this one, I don't think. Are they able to get to 21? I don't know. I'll give you my prediction here in a second, but not a great offense again for Utah this season. This is reminiscent of what we saw last year from Utah, Mason. And last year was, I believe, 8-5 season for Utah. It hasn't been great so far this season. They're missing their fearless leader in Cam Rising, and maybe he'll be back next year, maybe not. Tired of tired of talking about it. So I'm tired of talking about Cam Rising, that's for sure. And I know Utah fans are probably tired of talking about it as well. What do you think about this matchup here, man? I don't have a lot of faith in this Utah offense, as I said, but I think they can add in a wrinkle or two. And I think that maybe that's enough to be able to help out Isaac Wilson and help out this offense be able to score, some points.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to the last game against Houston, this Utah offense had a lot of really opportunities to score and just couldn't quite get it done in the red zone. Weren't able to even kick field goals. And then in some of the longer opportunities there, or I guess when they had the full length of the field, Isaac Wilson's turning the ball over. A couple of fluky sort of turnovers in that game, but when I was watching the offense, perform, I thought that they were doing a pretty good job. It was just the turnovers and the inability to score in the red zone that was keeping them from winning that football game when it's all said and done. And honestly, they should have scored about 30 in that football game, which would have been a huge step in the right direction for this offense and a struggling young quarterback. But speaking of Isaac Wilson, I really like the dude. I think that he's going to be a really good quarterback. When you watch him play, he definitely reminds you of Zach Wilson, his older brother, who, by the way, used to play for BYU. So add a little bit of intensity to this rivalry in that aspect for Isaac Wilson wanting to beat his older brother's old team there. But he's a gunslinger, man. He absolutely reminds me of Garrett Nussmeier in a bit. Now he's being forced to play much earlier in his career than Garrett Nussmeier was, and I think that is a huge difference. But at some point, this quarterback is going to have a big game, and it could come in one of the biggest moments for them. To take down a undefeated BYU team would be certainly a special game for him. I think that they've gotten healthier on the at wide receiver. I still like Singer a lot. I think he's been sort of the go-to guy. Got great hands, or not the go-to, but the most reliable, I would say. He's able to high point the ball and win some 50-50 matchups, and really like what he's been able to do. Can they get the run game going in this game? I think that's a big question. But ultimately, to me, I think that Utah has a real good chance at winning this football game if Isaac Wilson does not turn the ball over. BYU I think they're fourth in the country in takeaways, or at least in interceptions, and they've done a really good job with that. But when you look at BYU's defense, one of the things that I noticed, and I'll scroll down here, but the quarterback rating that they've that the quarterback has had that they've faced is only 96.3. That's good for fourth in the country. That defense has been really shutting down other quarterbacks, but also, what does that say about the other quarterbacks and how bad they've been? If Isaac Wilson has himself a day, I mean, that could pose problems for this BYU defense here. And I think the game really is as simple as if Isaac Wilson doesn't turn the ball over, then I really feel like Utah can win this football game. With couple that with what they're able to do and being a stingy defense. This is a rivalry game. You just never know what's going to happen. I think that Utah is coming in here and playing spoiler, and probably going to be pretty effective at that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You got to get Dorian Singer in the end zone, right? 0 touchdowns this season. That's a guy that you've gotten some yards from. Him and Brant Keithy are your leading receivers. Keithy been banged up here and there pretty much through his whole career, but this season as well. You got to get Dorian Singer. You got to hook him up in the end zone, man. I think that's if Utah can do that in this game once, and hit Brant once or twice, then Utah's in really, really good shape here, and that doesn't sound like it's very hard to do, right? It seems like that's something that's doable. You don't need to hit Dorian Singer and Brant Keithy for 5 touchdowns. That's I don't think that's necessary here. You just got to be able to sustain some drives. Don't put your defense in a compromising position over and over and over again. And I think that you're going to see some decent results there, but easier said than done for this Utah team so far this season. Let's jump into it. Let's give our predictions here. I like where your head's at, Mason, with this one. I'm not going to lie to you, brother. I like Utah to pull this upset right here. I think this is a good spot, especially considering it's their home spot, right? Bryce Eccles Stadium. It's going to be a raucous environment. Over under set at 40.5. I'm going to consider playing the under in this one. We'll talk about it on Thursday. That's a low number to play the under. I understand. I understand. But I think this is an ultra low scoring football game here. But I think Utah can spoil play spoiler here and spoil the BYU Cougar season. And honestly, it's not going to throw BYU off track, right, necessarily. But Utah would love nothing more than to beat their in-state rival in the Holy War here in BYU. And I think Utah's got a good chance to do that. Going to need some things to come together offensively for this team this weekend, though. What's your thoughts? I feel like we're sharing the same energy here. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, for the most part, obviously, I feel pretty good about Isaac Wilson in this football game. I think he puts it all together for the first time this season. I think he's had moments in games where he's looked great, and then you see the freshman mistakes. It's a tough situation that he's in to play as a true freshman, but I think that he's finally going to kind of learn from a lot of those mistakes and put his older brother's team down and be able to win this football game outright. I do differ slightly with you where I'm leaning more to the over, because if I'm thinking that Utah is going to be able to win this football game, I'm kind of thinking that they get to like 24 and it's a 24 to 23 type of football game, super close, nail biter. Kind of back and forth in a sense, and but if that's the game we're getting, if it's going to be that close and kind of a sloppy matchup, give me the home team, right? Give me the home dogs here. I think that's kind of a safe bet in this one, especially with it being a rivalry game. Those fans are going to be absolutely showing up and showing out. And to me, this is just going to be that first opportunity, not opportunity, but the first time that we've seen the Utes put it all together since Cam Rising has gone out for this team. I think the offense gets clicking. I like what they've been doing with Brant Keithy. They've been getting him the ball in the backfield in a lot of cases and getting creative at making sure that he gets his touches. I think that continues. I think, and also I kind of like a prop bet on Dorian Singer finally finding the end zone this week. I may be making a little bet on that for my little underdog fantasy app or whatever. But yeah, give me the over. Give me Utah. They cover and win. And BYU is still in it. I mean, they're still definitely in the Big 12 race here, just with one little blemish on their record. And also BYU loses this football game. That means that Boise State has an opportunity to jump above the Big 12 team. If they can continue to win and win out. We saw how close they were in their rankings this, I guess just yesterday. Maybe Boise State could sneak in there and not be the 12th team in the country and maybe get a little bit higher up there. That certainly would be interesting to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. No doubt about it. Looking forward to this one. This will be a real good one there and go a long way as far as college football playoff implications if Utah can figure out a way to pull this thing off at home. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I certainly do appreciate it, man. It's been a rough couple of days around here, but we have certainly pushed through, right? And that's really what it's all about. So certainly do appreciate you guys tuning in to the First and Long College Football Show. We're going to be back on Thursday with our betting show. It's called First and Long's College Football Shows Between the Lines. So we hope that you'll come and join us for that. Y'all have a good night. Drop some comments in the comment section. Let us know what you think the outcomes of these games are going to be. Certainly curious what you guys have to say. We love chit-chatting with you guys out there. Thanks again for watching. For Marcus and Mason, I'm signing out. Y'all have a great night.